Dr. Annie Reeves pressed her gloved hand against the observation window, her breath fogging the reinforced glass. Behind it, suspended in a crystalline stasis field, floated a perfectly preserved human brain. The specimen belonged to Lieutenant Massey Chen, a decorated officer who had volunteered for the Interspecies Medical Exchange Program. 3 months ago, the neural density is impossible, Annie whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and dread. Her colleague, a tall Valdaran physician named Korath, approached with multiple sensory appendages twitching nervously. Dr. Reeves, perhaps we should postpone further analysis. The council has expressed concerns. Annie turned to face him, her eyes blazing with scientific fervor. Concerns? Korath, do you understand what we're looking at? This changes everything we thought we knew about cognitive evolution. The Interspecies Medical Institute had been established 50 years after first contact, a gleaming monument to cooperation between humanity and the dozen alien species that comprised the Galactic Union. Annie had dedicated her career to xenoneurology, studying the biological underpinnings of consciousness across species. But nothing had prepared her for this discovery. Massey Chen had been an unremarkable subject at first, young, healthy, mentally stable, the kind of baseline human specimen perfect for comparative studies. But when Annie and her team had begun their deep neural scans, they'd stumbled upon something that defied all conventional understanding. Run the simulation again, Annie commanded. Moving to the holographic display terminal, the air above the console shimmered, and a three-dimensional map of Massey's neural network materialized. Billions of saptic connections pulsed with bioluminescent light, creating patterns that seemed almost intentional. Korath's skin shifted to a pale violet, his species' expression of fear. The redundancy coefficient is 847% above any known sentient species. Dr. Reeves, their brains shouldn't work. The energy requirements alone would kill them. I know, and he interrupted. Except it doesn't. Humans have evolved the most inefficient, resource-intensive cognitive architecture in the known galaxy, and somehow they've made it functional. She manipulated the hologram, zooming into the prefrontal cortex. Look here. See these auxiliary neural pathways? They're not just backup systems, they're active, parallel processing networks. When a human thinks, they're not following a single logical pathway like we assumed. They're running dozens of simultaneous thought processes, most of which they're not even consciously aware of. The implications had kept Annie awake for 72 hours straight. Every alien species in the Union had evolved efficient neural architectures, streamlined, logical, elegant. The Valdaran could perform complex calculations instinctively. The Kretath possessed perfect memory recall. The Salamites could process visual data at speeds that made them natural pilots. But humans were chaos incarnate. The pattern recognition subroutines are particularly disturbing, Korath said, manipulating a different section of the hologram. Humans can identify threats, opportunities, and abstract concepts from insufficient data. They call it intuition. Annie nodded grimly. It gets worse. Run the emotional integration analysis. The hologram shifted, revealing a complex web connecting the limbic system to virtually every other brain region. Korath's appendages went rigid with shock. Impossible. Emotional responses are supposed to be isolated, controlled. This level of integration should cause constant psychological breaks. How do they function? That's the terrifying part, Annie said softly. They don't just function, they excel. Human emotions aren't a bug in their neural architecture. They're a feature. Fear sharpens their reflexes. Anger provides strength. Love creates bonds that override logical self-interest. They've weaponized their own psychological instability. She pulled up historical data files. Earth's bloody history displayed in clinical detail. Every major human civilization was built on seemingly irrational behavior. They sacrifice themselves for abstract ideals. They fight wars over concepts that can't be quantified. They create art that serves no survival function. And somehow, this chaos made them the fastest advancing species in galactic history. Korath moved away from the hologram, his posture suggesting retreat. The Council needs to know the full scope of this. Dr. Reeves, I must report. Report what? Annie snapped. That humans are dangerous because they're unpredictable. That their brains are evolutionary nightmares that somehow work better than ours? Do you know what will happen if this research becomes public? She didn't wait for an answer. Panic. The Union will see humans as threats rather than allies. Everything we've built, every treaty, every partnership gone. Because we're afraid of what we don't understand. A soft chime interrupted their argument. The stasis field containing Massey's neural tissue flickered, and the specimen itself seemed to pulse with renewed activity. That's impossible, Korath breathed. The specimen is isolated, preserved. There should be no electrical activity, but there was. The neurons were firing in cascading patterns, creating waves of bioelectric energy that made the monitoring equipment scream warnings. Annie's hands flew across the controls, trying to understand what she was witnessing. Then she saw the message, encoded in the firing patterns themselves. "He's awake," she whispered. Not just the tissue sample. Somewhere in the Institute, Lieutenant Massey Chen had regained consciousness from the supposedly reversible neural mapping procedure, and somehow, impossibly, his awareness had reached across the Institute's security barriers to touch his own preserved brain tissue. The hologram shifted, reorganizing itself into words suspended in light. "What did you find?" Korath fled the laboratory, his multiple legs carrying him toward the security stations. But Annie remained, transfixed by the display. She thought of all the research, all the discoveries about human neural architecture, the redundancies, the chaos, the emotional integration. And she understood, finally, what made humans truly terrifying. They were pattern recognition engines wrapped in emotional complexity, capable of connecting disparate information across impossible distances. They didn't just think, they intuited, they felt. They reached beyond the boundaries of what should be possible. With trembling hands, Annie typed her response into the system. Everything. The neural tissue pulsed once more, and Lieutenant Massey Chen's consciousness withdrew, leaving only silence in the laboratory. Dr. Annie Reeves stood alone with her discovery, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again.